outraged and the restless. Mm-hmm.
Great. Let's jump right in.
Mm-hmm. Jagmeet
Singh.
Indeed.
Leader of the NDP party in Canada.
Indeed. Just to start, I wanted to do more research on the parliamentary process that he was trying to work with to get his recommendations approved, and why it failed because only one person opposed. I didn't get enough time to look into that, but you said that you did.
Yeah, so from what I read, he was pushing forth a motion for a unanimous vote. Mm-hmm. And again, I don't really know what the process is or why one vote stopped the entire motion from being approved or put forward. But it seems like because he specified he was looking for a unanimous vote, that was the main concern for him and why he was so emotional when there was only one person who looked quite dismissive. Mm-hmm. And that's why it didn't move forward.
I guess I'm curious about why the use of a unanimous vote process for what he proposed versus any other up-down vote process. I'm gonna look into it before I speak on why it failed or why it should fail or whatever. But more so, I'm more intrigued by just why he decided to call the other MP a racist, why he is or is not, and how people feel about what he said and why he was kicked out and how that's allowed or not allowed. Just so much involved in there to unpack.
I think for me, I was curious to know like what brought that on, why the term racist was brought on, and like why that's the choice that he went with for mm-hmm. calling out this MP, member of parliament. And I think that it's hard to say because I don't know. I think the House of Commons records there and you can watch like what happened. So I didn't watch it, so I'm not entirely sure. Just from being kind of like almost a peripheral and reading all the peripheral media around this versus like watching the actual thing for myself. It seemed like the MP made like a dismissive kind of like his body language was what really enraged Jagmeet because he made like a hand gesture that was like meh, like that's it, like he didn't actually. It felt like
his body language is what incited Jagmeet to consider him a racist.
Yeah, because it was so like what's the word? Like nonchalant. Like he didn't try to listen to what the motion was. He didn't put any. It was like he made that decision to say no super lightly. Like it was so easy for him to say no, and the implication of that is that he doesn't believe that there's systemic racism, or he doesn't believe that there's a problem that this motion needs to be put forward. So I think that is what incited all the anger in Jagmeet, and he also said why he wouldn't apologize, because I think he was asked to apologize.
Yeah.
And he said he didn't understand how something that is like such a positive, it was all, he was the only person to say no. So I think that too underscored why he was like, I'm not apologizing for something where I feel like that particular person was so dismissive to emotion that is such a positive foot forward. Which I can understand if you really believe that what you're doing, like if everybody says that giving food to the homeless is a great thing, and there's that one guy who's like, no, and everyone's like, why would you say no? That's almost like a universally good thing. You're trying to feed the homeless. I think that's where he was coming from.
I get that, and here's the thing with saying someone's racist. Like you have to make sure you have evidence before you can claim it, because racism can be mixed up with many things. It can be mixed up with ignorance. It can be mixed up with prejudice. But many times it usually is racist. But to hurl that accusation, it's like first degree murder, second degree murder, third degree. To say somebody intended to kill somebody is one thing versus somebody accidentally killing somebody. a person has still died, but their intent determines what the actual charge is. And even though I'm all for calling out people whenever it is racism, I think we do a disservice to the moments when we do need to call it out, when we aren't cautious when we do call it out. We have to be very cautious with the words that we use.
I think that Jagmeet was emotional, and I don't necessarily disagree with calling that MP a racist, nor do I agree with it. I'm more so interested in the impact of the action, because something like that seems to have not been done in the House of Commons before, to a point where he was booted out of the House of Commons. He was asked to leave based on his comments. And I think that, to me, is more interesting than the actual name calling, because Justin Trudeau called somebody a piece of shit in the House of Commons, and he wasn't removed from the House of Commons. Another person called a female a slut and a baby, and that person wasn't booted out of the House of Commons. So whether that person, that MP, was a racist or not, I'm confused as to why he got booted out.
Standards.
Exactly. So inherently, it's almost like, even if that dude wasn't a racist, now you're underscoring possibly the systemic racism in our House of Commons. So you kind of made a bad decision there. They could have addressed it in the actual, at the incident happened. They asked him to apologize, but they could have said, let's talk about this. Yeah. Let's talk about why this is quote unquote disrespectful, why this might not be the right terminology. Let's talk about why you dismissed it. Mm-hmm. Let's talk about what your actions, your body language, how that affects the way a person sees you saying no, because all of that stuff is cause for concern in the House of Commons.
I think this is a good moment for Jagmeet to show why he can be valuable in Parliament. Yeah. Because at the moment right now, he's just Trudeau's left-hand puller. Like, Trudeau's here, and he's like, no, come here. Trudeau's okay, sure, thanks. That's it. He's kind of playing a puppet role without realizing it. But I think this moment can kind of be something that he can see as his calling. Like, when you find out what your purpose is in the House, not necessarily what you've been told your purpose is, but what your purpose actually is.
Because he might not become PM.
No.
But his role in the House could be to be this person who brings up the shit. Like compass. AOC.
Yeah.
Like AOC, she brings up shit, and she's very articulated. She brings in a lot of facts, and she tries not to necessarily pose her opinion or her position, but she asks a lot of questions, and that's what I find is really good. Think. Yeah, and she points out the obvious, and she points out all these things, and I've been reading a lot about her. I try not to ride the AOC wagon to be like, oh yeah, she's great. She really actually is pretty awesome, because her arguments and the way that she approaches discussing topics in in the Senate,
in the House of Congress.
In the House of Congress, is really smart, because she's not asserting her opinion. She's asking questions to uncover facts, and anybody who's watching, because they're all recorded, the average person will be able to deduce what the underscoring issue is. And I feel like Jagmeet has that
chance.
He has a chance. He needs to work on some of his,
emotional control and delivery of fact.
Not to say that his emotions are invalid. He's very, as people of color, we can understand being enraged by how people behave. But because how people behave in relation to race, or in relation to changing certain things for people of color, but because he has this he's in this position of, he's got leverage now, I believe. Ever since this incident, he's got so much leverage. He's got so many people, so many young people who are listening to him because he's speaking their language. Like, an average person will just call out a racist whenever, because that's how it is now. Everything's scrutinized in the same way that he did. But he has the unique opportunity to be able to bring those discussions that everyday people have, the language that everyday people use, bring that into the House of Commons and push that forward. And I think him getting booted out of the House of Commons, and him having the courage to just be emotional, just say what he said, that's a bold move.
Position.
Yeah, that's a bold move. That's a strong move for people of color. That's a very obvious way to rally people of color behind you, even if they don't necessarily think you'll be the PM, or even if they don't necessarily think that you are the best person for the job or agree with all your points of view, that action got people behind him.
Yeah.
Got Rihanna to follow him.
There you go.
I think that was who she followed.
Well, followed him for a previous instance, but still, what I find about him is that he maintains his moral compass through it all. Whether he's right or wrong, at least you can see that he's authentic. You can see that he means what he's saying.
He has a lot of integrity behind everything he says. And I like that he said, I'm not going to apologize for that. He's not going to apologize for the emotions, because also too, he's allowed to feel like mad because something that seems unanimously positive wasn't pushed forward. Whether it's racist or not, that's besides the point. His anger is a result of the systemic racism that is in the Canadian government.
The fact that he's angry can only make his constituents feel like, yeah, he actually cares about it.
Yeah, that he cared enough to be emotional and to be angered by that.
Yeah.
Like,
it's not a bad thing.
No.
If anything, it brings up discussion about how our House of Commons works and how it's been working. Yeah. So he's still making progress without intentionally trying to take it that way.
Yeah. And everybody's talking about it now, which is great because it's so easy to watch American media and look at the House of Congress. Something like that. How Congress people discuss politics and the way that they look at how to pass all these bills, and it's easy to scrutinize the American government because they're so popular in the media.
Yeah.
But to look at Canadian government with the same eye, you'll find a lot of stuff. Yeah. Yeah.
More useful for us to do so. Obviously more useful, but it's another discussion, I guess.
Yeah.
To shed light on the other side of that equation, the person who decided to vote against the motion, being from Quebec, I'm not sure which region he represents. I apologize deeply for not taking the time, been tired from working again, to actually really go into this subject. Might revisit it on another episode after doing some more research, but a lot of people don't know that Quebec, once you get off the island of Quebec, the socio-political narrative is very, very close to the South. Very, very, very close. Where
the South of America.
The South of the United States. It's like they've lost the war and they're holding on to a past. The license plates say "Je me souviens," which means I will always remember. They hold on to a loser's narrative to be unkind about it very, very strongly, and they have an unspoken bond where they don't need to say when they're going to oppress. They're all in tune, kind of like how it is in the South, where you don't need to tell them to do this. It's just the way it goes. So for that MP, it might have been a chance just to, like, he was given an opportunity to be casually racist without consequence. It's like, okay, sure. So you want to vote here, boy? Oh, it looks like you are 3 days late for voting. You might have to come back. That type of narrative. And I have to do my research, but if that was the gesture or the body language that was given off to Jagmeet, I can completely understand his need to not find the appropriate words to call out that act, to just call it out and then worry about it later. Because I can understand what it's like to see that narrative play around you, where it's hating you as a game that's being played with cool hands, where it's not overt, but you can still feel the coldness.
I'm trying to find the words. Like, I believe that the MP's actions and the way that he behaved, the one from Quebec, were too cavalier. Is that the right word? Mm-hmm. Like, I don't know how to explain. It was just.
But he had the luxury of being cavalier in that behavior,
and which is underscoring again the racism that's apparent in the House of Commons. Maybe not that particular saying no was racist. You can argue that, but his body language, his disposition, the way that he treated the motion being put forward, that shows his ignorance, that may show his racism, himself as a racist. Prejudice, whatever that may be, it's all in the actions and nuances of everything that occurred there other than what was said.
Yeah.
So I think it's an interesting, like, fortunate and unfortunate incident that occurred, because it is a lot of uh, calling a lot of people to even understand what how the hell the House of Commons works.
I definitely want to revisit the video to see the actual reaction on video from both parties, to really get an understanding of what they were vibing off of, what the vibe was, not just what the text was.
I mean, I feel like we go off of clips, like things we see in the media and things like that, because that's essentially what everybody's seeing. Not everybody is going to go and do that deeper research to watch the entire full conversation. So these are kind of like our initial thoughts around, if the average person who's ingesting media from on this topic is seeing it in the same way, what is the impression that they might get? And I think the impression is polarized, which is very extreme. Either you're saying that he was disrespectful, Jagmeet was disrespectful and shouldn't have said that in the House of Commons, or you're like,
he's a racist.
That guy's a racist. Forget it. So that's also what these tidbits of media kind of do. I feel as though media does that always.
Yeah.
Media always tries to polarize the opinion between right and wrong, between yes or no, rather than just inviting discussion around it. And because that's what sells, and that's what gets clicks, and that's what people buy into. But I feel like we can look at this and say there's more to look at. There are deeper things to look at, and who knows, through that research, I might find myself voting differently if that's the case. It really has to be that much effort put into who and what and where.
For the record, my vote is always strategic.
Yeah.
Always. Well, who I like isn't always who I would want to vote for. It's where will my vote tip the scale to what I want.
But I also found that only occurred to me until I started seeing how my vote actually affects my everyday life, which wasn't until much later. So I can understand why the young vote, the youth vote, is not as high as it was. It's increased, especially with JT. For some reason, he got the youth to vote, and I think it's through his digital campaigning, honestly. He's very smart. But, yeah, because if you don't see how the vote's going to affect you, like if you don't see how voting for Jagmeet or voting for Liberal or whatever is going to affect your everyday life in a very immediate and tangible way, not many people are going to put that much strategy into the vote. They're just going to be like, well, I think I like that person, I'll vote for that person.
Yeah.
Whereas if you were able to see a direct line between your vote and your life, you will be more inclined to do that research. So because I have seen that over the last few years, I'm very much inclined to do my research on Jagmeet's platforms and his views and whether or not that makes sense. And also the likelihood of, even if I did vote for him, what does that look like?
Yeah.
Is the NDP even going to get the majority? Probably not. But we'll see, because, COVID, race, there's lots of stuff. Lots of variables.
Solid. Appropriation.
We kind of wanted to talk about this because in the news lately, Aunt Jemima is no longer going to be Aunt Jemima.
Yeah.
As if we didn't already know that was a racist. It was a rooted in racist branding.
Like, there's just so much to say about it. Like, there's just so much, because in the grand scheme of things, who gives a flying fuck? But I get it. Just like with blackface, I get it. But who gives a flying fuck what somebody else does to themselves or how they feel about you? It's just like with Aunt Jemima. Yes, that's a portrait of a Southern mammy who's there to cook and feed you and take care of you. But at the same time, that is a historical truth. Now, who profits from it is another story. Who owns it, who dictates it, another story. But the representation of a Southern black woman providing something that tastes good is not a bad narrative necessarily. It's how her narrative is being controlled that is the issue. I don't care if I see Uncle Ben on some rice that tastes good. I don't care if Aunt Jemima's in my fucking pantry right now and I'm going to slather that all over my fucking pancakes. It tastes good. Changing her face doesn't change the product or who profits from it. Who gives a fuck? At the end of the day.
Well, I think because it doesn't make a difference. It doesn't make a difference in the product. It makes a difference in the culture, again, workplace culture. It makes a difference in what the brand stands for. I can see why they've made this move. I can see why for today's youth or today's activists, why it's a good move on their end. Because
low-hanging fruit.
Because yeah, it is. It's like, oh, all we have to do is change that. I guess we'll just change it to, a gender neutral Aunt.
Here's Mary syrup.
Cardi or something. I don't know. Who knows? Maybe it's just gonna be called imitation maple syrup. Like,
who knows?
Who knows? All I know is that I feel like there's a lot of pressure on brands to do this. To be politically correct now, to be like, oh, that's kind of bad. Let's not do that. Let's change that. Let's change the narrative. Let's be sensitive. Let's do better, and bring down all of these very known and historically known institutions of racism, like all the statues that are coming down, like all the names of streets that will be changed, and all that. Brand names are no different.
I'm all for it. It's just the enragement with one. Y'all didn't know? Like,
it's been there forever. I thought Aunt Jemima was made by someone. You think if Aunt Jemima was sold in Walmart, do you really think that was started?
A black-owned company.
Considering how many.
Just no. No, it's not. Now, people have known this forever. It's just that right now it's like, okay, we have to do it. Every decision that's happening right now is not, at least for me, from corporations, it's not necessarily care. It's capitalism. It's supply and demand. The demand is change. We supply it. Thank you. Keep buying it. That's all it is. So to say appropriation with Aunt Jemima, we're worrying about, as I always refer to in all of my papers, we're worrying about the fires, the symptomatic fires versus the root cause. If you take if you don't want to see smoke in the air, you got to extinguish the fire. Plain and simple. If, as an Asian person, do you care if somebody says they love chopsticks and opens up a chopstick store? Do you give a shit?
Not really. If anything, I was like, damn, I should have done that.
And
damn. Also, I use chopsticks in the Philippines or in Thailand.
Fair. Still part Chinese.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like chopsticks though. They're fun.
But still, when your cultural house is in order and you have a sense of self, you have a sense of pride, you have a sense of belonging, you have a sense of place, you know that there is a quote unquote house for your person, it's harder to have your house disturbed by the occurrence in the outside because it won't change or dictate your house. The tail won't wag the dog. Whereas in black culture, we have tails that are wagging tails. We don't have a house. If we were making money off of Aunt Jemima's picture, we wouldn't care if she was a mammy. We wouldn't care if it was enforcing the stereotype of the mammy because we would be owning that, not having it
Asians kind of do that.
Taken care of.
Asians definitely push that Asian product and make it like, ooh, the white people will buy this. And push that. Yeah. Let's make that soy sauce real soy saucy.
Yeah,
let's make that branding look super Asian.
So they know they're getting what they want. They want the Asian
authentic stuff.
People want the Aunt Jemima taste. So she's doing the picture is doing justice to our history. That woman made some good ass flavored shit.
Now the difference is the owner of the companies.
Yes.
Like Asians make Asian products, they whiteify them for the broader
mass
crowd.
Consumption.
And that's the choice, but we still benefit off of them. In the same way that tons of other people do the same thing. We kind of have to, because if you're going to be in America, you got to kind of pander to American capitalism and white economics. So, for example, South Asians, you go to an Indian restaurant, they have butter chicken.
Mhm.
That's not in India. Like, I've had so many friends who are like, yeah, no. There's this one girl in my class in university who we were going around talking about food we like before class started, and this one white chick in the class, she's like, oh my gosh, she turns to this my classmate, I don't remember her name because it was a long time ago. She's like, I love butter chicken. She just said that. And this chick lost her shit. She's like, and she's got an accent, she's full South Asian, she's like super proud, really smart, really smart, well spoken, articulate. Oh, she went off, and I was just like with my chopsticks watching. Like, it was hilarious. She's like, butter chicken was made for this reason, and so we don't make that anyway. You're never gonna find that anywhere in India. And I learned that day that butter chicken wasn't Indian.
There you go.
And it was, if she didn't do that, people wouldn't have known. So I see there's a place for this type of action. I see there's a place to say and be blatant about where the economics lie. Because I think, for me, when it comes to cultural appropriation, the only way that I get upset about it is if somebody takes who's not of that culture and profits and benefits, but doesn't give credit to that. It's like if that person, like a white person, opened a chopstick store and had no Asian consultation, no Asians working there, didn't acknowledge that chopsticks are from Asia, and was like, oh yeah, these are white eating sticks. Like,
that's, I think,
Christopher
Columbus and shit.
Yeah, if I would say cultural displacement is more so what I would see it as, not appropriation. Because if you are taking something out of that culture, claiming it as your own, or not even acknowledging that you've taken it from a different culture, or it's in homage to, or whatever, and then you benefit monetarily from it, and you don't give back to that community, that to me is where I would get upset. I wouldn't necessarily I don't know if I'd call it appropriation at the same time. I just know that that's stealing. We talked about this before. You steal from other people, regardless of if it's culturally based or not, it's still stealing.
To appropriate for me is to take something and say it's yours, and then to basically eradicate what it actually was.
Yeah.
But you can't eradicate something if its source cannot be eradicated. And that's where our issue as Black people lies. We're still trying to find a foundation, a footing in the world post-slavery. We don't have a home. I think fixing that will fix so many of the things that ail us emotionally in society, the things that trigger us. Like, if I walk down the street and call a white person a cracker, they'll be like, "Why are you guys mad?" But they won't feel angry. They'll be more fearful for what I'm feeling versus what they're feeling, because there's no power, or the power that word would have isn't strong enough to penetrate what they've been built like into. They have a unshakable, unwavering pride that can't be attacked by a word.
White racial slurs, quote unquote racial slurs, they just don't carry the same weight. They don't have the same impact. Off. They're like, yeah, cracker. Like, it's not the same impact in the same way that
it doesn't have power.
Yeah, it doesn't, because of white supremacy. Because if you're the supreme, it doesn't matter what people call you. You're the supreme. If you feel like
take from you, it doesn't matter, because you're still sourcing it.
Yeah, you're still the source of everything. So I get why, and I understand too. Like, there's lots of people, especially celebrities, who over the years have worn, or it's usually worn. I feel like it's braids. A lot having to do, not just braids, but like the Chinese style traditional shirts, for example. Like Gwen Stefani, she became part of the news recently because of all the cultural appropriation she's done over the years, where she wore a bindi when she was in No Doubt, and she had the Harajuku girls. And I mean, to an extent, yeah, you can say she took from a culture, but it doesn't mean that she also didn't acknowledge where that culture came from. Yeah. Because her boyfriend, South Asian, Tony Canal, he's Indian. So that's why can't she enjoy it? Why can't she learn about other cultures and embrace them? If we're getting down on
amplify them.
Yeah, exactly. If we're getting down on so many people about like, oh, there's not enough representation, Well, when a white person is trying to shed light and trying to learn and trying to embrace other cultures, and it's not just white people, if anybody's doing that, why, who are we to say like, oh, don't do that, that's ours?
Yeah.
Versus, oh, cool, like you're into that, let me introduce you to, for example, if I want box braids, you think I'm going to go to an Asian girl and ask her for box braids? I'm going to ask you,
Yeah.
hey, I kind of want box braids, I want to try it out, do you know
Where should
any
I go?
yeah, and then I'm going to give my money to a black business. So why would you deny me giving a business money
Yeah.
when that's the source of where that knowledge and where that culture comes from? Like, if you want authentic Asian food,
I'm going to ask an Asian.
you're going to ask an Asian. Where do I go? You're going to go to an Asian restaurant, contribute, give that Chinese family money if you want that particular dish.
I think
why can't we continue to do that?
The people, and this is not to knock black women who, because this is the main narrative that I see it from, where they get mad at other women of other races for wearing braids and stuff like that, or quote unquote urban styles. I understand the emotional pain, but we have to, and sometimes black women will exclude me from the discussion of hair because I'm a male, but we have the same hair, and I can understand the emotions behind not feeling like it's adequate in its natural state and having to defend that, and then seeing others use it in a way that it's fashionable, whereas for you it was deemed unacceptable. I can understand the pain in that, but if we were secure, what other people did with their hair would not be the issue. We're seeing our issues amplified by the fact that other people can get away with what we cannot. It's not that they should lose the right, it's that we should acquire the right. It's not a white privilege, it's a black disadvantage in this instance. If Kim Kardashian wants to wear box braids, we should have 10 black beauticians who are ready to sell that style that she just made popular, so then that money is entering our pockets.
Yeah.
We should not be thinking about that as a fight.
And I don't know if this is true necessarily for the black community, but I feel like for Asians, for example, and me personally, I have no problems using white money or white people to amplify the things that because they're, hey man, you want to be an ally? Here you go.
Amp me up.
Here's a way. Mm-hmm. Right? So I have no issues with that. I have no issues. I had to think about it before. Like, if, I want to work for somebody who's a person of color and only do this, and you know what? Options are limited. So why not take the white money, use that white power,
flip it
to your advantage, and then uplift people who are colored and uplift people who need that support. Mm-hmm. You're doing the good work. And I think that if more people are less, I think lots of people are thinking about how certain actions can be divisive, or how, it's not authentic if it's coming from here or there or here or there. Didn't Malcolm X say by any means necessary? Indeed. So if you are using donations from white people, is that not okay? Or if you're using somebody who has a lot of pull in the community who happens to be a rich white male, but that person's ready to give you that, why wouldn't you take advantage of it?
I am colorblind to one thing only: money. Just give it to me.
Yeah.
That's it.
And I do also think, bringing that up as well, like for both of us, I think the reason why we tend to agree a lot on race is because we're not colorblind. I don't ever want to be colorblind. I want to always see color, but not in the negative connotation that everybody else seems to say. Oh, all you do is see color? Well, yeah, it's beautiful. That's why I look at it.
Seeing it, but don't make it blind you. Don't turn the saturation up. Make sure your picture is well calibrated.
It's just one aspect of a person, but it is still an aspect of a person.
Yes. To
say to you, like, I don't see color, I kind of do. It's the only thing I can see at the moment. Mm-hmm. But it's not the only thing that I see, and I don't let it dictate the way that I make decisions or interact with you. But I understand that it's something to be celebrated because it's part of who you are.
It's something to inform yourself with.
Yeah, and to be colorblind is to kind of negate something that a person has become really, really intimate with their whole life, which is the color of their skin. So I can't really agree with people who are like, I don't see color. We are all the same color. I'm like, no, we're really not.
Most
ignorant thing you can say.
That's the thing that I'm told by white friends that is the most ignorant. At the same time, it's hard to engage because they sincerely just can't see it, because they mean well, but it is the most ignorant thing to possibly say. I don't see your color. Then what do you see?
Exactly. Like, saying that.
What do you see?
There's only one thing to see. We're not clear.
Do you see just somebody who must be like you?
Or you have like just eyeballs floating with absolutely nothing around? Are we walking around like skeletons? Like, no. I've always been taught as a kid, and I've been lucky.
Very validating.
I've been very lucky to be taught as a kid that color is meant to be celebrated, not blinded, not black and white, not muted and turned down. If somebody's black, I want to know about their experience as a black person, because that's cool. Like, if somebody's South Asian and they're bringing in a diverse perspective, I want to know about the fact that butter chicken is an American, North American dish. I want to know about all the different nuances of color. I want to learn about the way that color interacts with each other, because isn't that the most, to really create a social fabric, don't we have to understand colors?
Like, if your goal to understand your fellow man is to remove something from them, think about that.
Yeah.
If you start from, well, I'm going to remove something to make all of us palatable, who is that benefit?
Yeah. And that's why another perspective that I don't often see about why All Lives Matter doesn't work is because it does do that. It takes away the color. It's a blanket statement to not be able to, to not have that uncomfortable conversation about why certain colors don't matter, and why it's very obvious that certain colors need the attention. It's because we're supposed to be celebrating color. There's a reason why there are festivals and different things around the world to celebrate different days. There's reasons why in Canada you can celebrate Caravana, and you can celebrate Diwali, and you can celebrate Chinese New Year. And I'm proud that that's the case. No. And if you go out, people want to do that. So why are you going to then bring in the police of cultural appropriation when there are so many different colors going out to these events and learning and enjoying and being with people?
Yeah.
And I'm not going to ever be the person to say appropriation is present at those festivals. You're literally trying to educate people. So if a little girl puts on like traditional Chinese garb, I'm not going to be like, ooh, that black girl's appropriating.
She's learning some love.
She is learning love. She's learning what colors look like. She's amplifying that color in her life. So.
Yeah.
All right. Last one. Juneteenth. Hello, black person.
Hey, how's it going?
What is Juneteenth?
Well, I want to say I'm not from the United States of America, so it doesn't really apply to me in the exact same way, but it applies to me in a holistic way of how black people are treated and the narrative, how it changes and how it evolves. That being said, it was when slaves in Texas realized that they were free. So it was the point where the last slaves had been awoken from their slumber of slavery, I guess is a good way to put it. And I've always wondered why African Americans celebrated July the 4th and not this date, but I didn't know much about it, and to be honest, I didn't care to really investigate much of it because it didn't really pertain to me, and I have my own issues with the African American experience versus the Caribbean Canadian experience, where I'm not really in need to educate myself more about them when I know enough, or I feel like I don't know enough about my own story. So that being said, Juneteenth might be a way to unify people of all of the African diaspora in seeing ourselves. Sometimes it takes pockets of us bubbling up to a point where we can see over the horizon, and that will be the connecting factor. So I'm all for something like Juneteenth growing in stature and reach, and just showing the timelines and the history of slavery in America, in North America, in South America, in the Americas, and just really showing. Sometimes people lose context when you're discussing with them about why black people can't just pull themselves up by their bootstraps or just suck it up and join the American dream. Sometimes they need to be shown what isn't being shown, and that is the black experience, because it's intentionally not shown to the service of whiteness. Because when you can get all the new immigrants on your side on the narrative of not appreciating black bodies, it only helps eradicate those black bodies. I think Juneteenth should be added to the curriculum down there. I think it should be something that is celebrated on par with July the 4th. If it was the first day where these slaves became Americans, technically, from the Constitution standpoint, then I think it should be celebrated in the same way, and it should be taught in the same way because the Black American narrative dictates a lot for Black people around the world, whether they are part of that narrative or not. So any advancement in the positive narrative of African Americans, I'm all for it. That's my rant on Juneteenth.
I got the day off.
I didn't. The fuck is that?
Well, it just goes to show you that the company. Well, that's weird though, because
I work for an
you work
American
for an
company.
American company, and I do now too. And it was interesting because we had the day off, and it was very much communicated as not a holiday. It didn't say, "Yay, we have a new holiday," which is a lot of other companies have used that language to describe having that day off. But our CEO, who's Iranian, the company that I work for is a division of a larger American company. So the American company decided to have Juneteenth off for all employees, and then the leadership in our company definitely wanted to do the same thing. So what we did on that day, or when that communication was sent to us, it was very much from like a reflective point of view, and like our CEO gave us questions to think about, and we held an open mic on that day around lunchtime to talk about just race and to talk about what this day means and what it means for our team and what conversations about race look like in our company and what diversity looks like in the company. So I think that was an interesting take. Like a lot of other people, like, woohoo, I have it off, and it's a holiday, and I can see how it can be because it's just like July 4th.
It's a valid feeling.
Very much that way. But we spent that hour, so in our open mic, we spent that hour people like pretty much sharing what their experience has been with racism and how we should continue to talk about racism. There are Black people on the team, so they spoke as well. There were also white people on the team who didn't really speak much and they just listened. So that was nice to kind of see people try to find a way to talk about this and integrate it into work life. Yeah, that's pretty much what Juneteenth was for our company.
Fair. I'd like to see the day grow in stature. I think the more we shed light on the African American experience, and I say this again, as Black people around the world, we do not live in America, not all of us. But what happens to Americans becomes the narrative of how the world views all of us, whether rightfully or wrongfully. So whatever their narrative is, we're all invested as Black people. I think that gets lost in narrative to white people outside of America who are seeing people uprise in their countries when they don't have they don't have an issue from their perspective that is American. I think they don't understand the narrative that the Black American is the prototypical narrative for the Black human around the world. So we're very much invested in the history being told accurately, because a lot of people who live in the Middle East and Asia, their narrative of a Black person is basically Cameron, for better or worse. That limits the box as to who we can be, who we should be. It puts us in a quote unquote place. And I think a day like Juneteenth that can illuminate the systemic issues that cause us to retard our growth in terms of the economy, in terms of home ownership, in terms of education, why we aren't able to integrate as well as immigrants. I think it gives them a narrative to understand and to empathize with us, kind of in the same way where I think all Canadians will universally agree that the Native Americans have gotten a short stick, which is why we aren't opposed to things that are explicitly meant to uplift them or assist them or get them back on footing in some way, or to hear their cries and say, yes, we want to help. And it's never a debate either, ever. I feel like in the States, it's a debate to help blacks. In Canada, it's not a debate. It's just, will it be implemented and respected? More of that hating with cool hands. In Canada, we treat the natives with a nice face and a dagger in the back. And I think in the States, they just treat blacks like trash, and that's it. But it's accepted. So it's almost like, which one's worse? And I feel like a day like Juneteenth can just serve as the knowledge base for all the young people that will be educated to understand why people are here versus here.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like as a kid of an immigrant, I'm very aware that the indigenous peoples and Black communities are the reason why we're here in Canada. Without their suffering and without basically the genocide of indigenous peoples all over the world, immigrants wouldn't be where they are. White people wouldn't have the supremacy that they have to lay claim and stake to those places. So when I kind of hear that people, especially like Asians or non-blacks, non-indigenous people who are not white, saying that they don't, like, maybe there's not that same fervor to fight within this movement. I think that there's a lot of stake in it for us, because we wouldn't be here without those groups of people enduring what they have, and in learning that history. So if the Black Canadian narrative is built into the education system, as well as the Indigenous history, as well as the African American and Native Americans, Native to America history into Canadian history, it just creates a bigger context for understanding why race is a conversation to not be afraid of, why it should be something that kids are comfortable talking about and get educated about at a young age, because it's the one way that kids learn to differentiate is by color. So if they're not taught what that means or what the context is, how can they have any views or any values or any empathy to think for themselves as they get into adulthood? They just have to adopt whatever their parents have,
whatever the narrative is,
whatever the media, whatever they see, but they don't have enough knowledge to create their own value and their own stance on it. So I'm very much, whenever I hear that people don't feel like they have stake in this, it's a no-brainer to be behind these movements and to be part of them, because again, without these groups of people suffering for a long time and continue to suffer, immigrants can't be here.
Yeah. Like with these holidays and this movement, I think it's done a good job to make clearer lines. Although the lines that are becoming clearer, a lot of people still try to find the shadows within it to not vote yay or nay, or to say present or not present. I think a lot of people still want to duck the overall social climate. It might be possible, it might not, but eventually you will have to interact with the new world, or the new narrative of the world, and let your chips fall where they may. But I think it's also something that has done a good job of letting the racists feel like, you know what, I have a band of brothers of racists with me. I don't mind standing on our small little block, but we're going to let you know we're racist. Fuck yeah. I much rather that guy, because at least he has the balls to tell me, he has enough balls to respect himself that he can't live a lie. If he's racist, at least he can own it. It's way more insulting, time wasting, damaging, painful to invest in somebody who won't admit that they hold views that are not in my best interest.
Yeah.
What's the purpose?
Or for them to be claiming that, or like the fake apologies,
Mm-hmm.
where it's like, oh, I didn't know that was racist, or oh, I apologize. Who's that NFL player who apologized or whatever? Like, whether he is really a racist or not, is debatable for
He's
a lot
ignorant,
of
for
that
sure.
he is ignorant. So I feel like it's we were talking about this before. I just remembered that there are less dark corners for people who are closet racist to hide.
Yeah.
And people are calling out things as they see them because they should, and it's the time to do that. And while it might be annoying to some people to be like, oh, everything's racist these days, you can't walk around, you can't do whatever, but that's kind of the point. The point is to do this
change the narrative.
You gotta do this over exaggeration of finding these things and calling it out, even if someone saying that something is racist might not be. The fact that they had the bravery to say it should spark a discussion for you to be able to
dismiss it accurately,
yeah,
but at least engage.
Yeah, to bring up that, pulling the race card, it's not a bad thing. Let's actually pull the race card. Mm-hmm. Let's take back the race card, whatever the hell it is, because it's better to identify the racist now. Yeah. And you know where you stand.
Yep. I'm all for that.
We were talking about the word, like calling a white person a cracker.
Yeah, like if a word can only have power if the person that you're flinging it at can't withstand it. Like, if you call a white person cracker, they'll feel more fearful for how you're feeling versus how they're feeling, because they think you're in an enraged state where they now must be aware of your feelings. It's not that you've hurt them. They just know that there's hurt coming from somewhere and they better be wary.
Yeah.
Versus if you're a person of color and somebody flings it at you, you're worried about it. Just like, wow, I feel like shit. They're dictating my environment right now. I feel as if I'm in an environment where I have to be cautious about who will defend my rights, who will be on my... You're not really thinking about, man, that person's really ignorant.
Yeah, and in like looking at the media, and we said earlier where it can be really polarizing. I think when it comes to race, it is polarizing. You're either racist or you're not. Mm-hmm. No matter what degree of racism you might have, you're a little racist, you're still racist. Mm-hmm. It's the variance of ignorance that determines how racist someone is.
How saturated it is.
Yeah. So I think because this is the time where there's so much scrutiny around actions and around whether you are racist or not, it is the time to have those hard conversations, and it is the time to figure out who is and who's not, because it's a lot of change to be able to identify those people, those groups of people, and to be able to have those hard conversations with them. Because the non-racist people will obviously want to have conversations towards change. So
being afraid of change is probably not a good sign.
Yeah.
Probably not a good sign. That's it, bud?
That concludes episode 4, which is called
Mid-aged.
The Middle-Aged and the Restless.
The Middle-Aged and the Restless.
Why?
A play on when we were all home for lunch, or homesick from school. Right after lunch, right after Bob Barker was done, it was time for the Young and the Restless. And now we're old. The millennials are old and getting made fun of by Gen Z. So we're the middle-aged and the Restless.
I also watched All My Children.
There you go. Awesome.
Join us next time.
À la prochaine. Ciao.